Well, thank you both very much. We really do appreciate it. And Yelena, why don't you start us off? Introduce yourself. Tell us how long you have been teaching and what you teach.
Of course. Good morning. My name is Yelena Trice. I work for Duncanville Independent School District, and I've been teaching for 25 years now.
And George.
So my name is George Cuba. I work in Irving ISD. I've been working as a paraprofessional for 3 years, 1 year as substitute teacher, and the last 2 years as a math teaching assistant.
And so here we are, we're getting ready for a new school year. How excited are you? Well, Yelena, we'll start with you. How excited are you about the new school year?
I'm very excited about the new school year. I'm always looking forward to meeting new students, working with staff. I'm also, given the changes, I am anticipating some challenges due to the teacher shortage. So I'm really anxious to start off the new year and get things going so I can go ahead and do what I need to do, what's best for students as we start off a new year.
And George?
Well, I'm excited. I want to see my students again. It's always nice kind of coming back to seeing them a year older and getting closer to graduation. Trying to be a teacher, so I'm not sure who's going to take my spot, because I know that to the teachers I was helping, it was a good help, even just having a second body in the classroom to at least have some reassurance. I'm not sure. I would say I'm very excited. I think some coworkers that I knew for the past year or two have left, and some of them left the profession. So it's kind of uncertain. I'm like, will I be next? Will I have less support this year? So there's some uncertainty to the future, even though I'm excited to teach again and to finally teach in a full capacity and see my students again.
And you want to be a teacher full-time.
Yes.
And so you've been a teaching assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell me what your job entails.
So the teaching assistant, basically, at a minimum, I tutor students. So students who are falling behind in class, or students who, in my case, it was designed specifically, my position is designed because of House Bill 4545, which that any student who failed a required STAR test, in this case Algebra 1 or the 8th grade math, they needed to get 30 hours of instruction outside of the core classes. So for example, you couldn't offer 30 minutes of tutoring during their math class because that's during the instruction time, it wouldn't count. So for those students, we call them retesters. I would tutor them in batches and groups with other teachers as help. Also during classes, I could enter the class, and while the teacher, a math teacher, gave their direct lesson, I could help them in class, kind of do like a mini lesson or go over materials. And then in some cases, I would even help co-teach lessons with the teacher because they knew I wanted to be a teacher, so they'd give me opportunities to teach in a greater capacity. So I would do pretty much all the way from tutor all the way to even a co-teacher in the classrooms.
You both spoke about the challenges that you face. Yelena, tell me about the challenges that you're expecting this year to face, and what are your biggest concerns?
One of the challenges I'm definitely concerned about is, given that we have the teacher shortage, covering classes, making sure those students have someone in the classroom. There have been times I have been pulled to cover. Just because a teacher is out, we may not always get a substitute, so therefore it falls on the staff that's currently in the building to cover those classes. And with that, also being able to just service my students that I do work with, because if I'm pulled to cover a class, I can't always get to the students that need the help, because since I am a special education teacher and there's service time when it comes to working with these kids, just to make sure they have the skills that they need. That is definitely a challenge, and it's a concern that I really have this year. Also, in working with, given that we have a shortage, we will have new staff, and that new staff also will have to get acclimated with working with the kids. And I enjoy working with new people because they're open to what is, given that I am a veteran teacher, the pitfalls, the concerns, what to expect when it comes to working with kids. So it's a twofold situation as far as just meeting the needs of the kids, and also I'm really looking forward to just working with the new staff.
And George, what are the challenges that you are concerned about going into this new year?
Well, Yelena there were 2 points she went over that was not in my head too, because I felt that. One of them is in terms of coverage. I know that whenever, not just this past school year, but the year before, so my first substitute teacher, of course, within my job title and job description to cover the class as a substitute. But these 2 years after that, or the past 2 years, as a teaching assistant, well, that's not my official job cast anymore. But with all the teacher, not just absences, but also resignations as well, and especially in January of 2021, there, 2021, 2021, 22, I think it might have been, no, 22, yeah, last year. There was so many absences because of the new surge of COVID. I had substitute every day, and when I substitute every day, that means that I don't get to TA, I don't get to tutor minimum, I get to tutor. And so students that I needed to have tutored for their algebra retest in that spring, they didn't get a chance all of January because I was substituting all the time. So that's a big concern as a paraprofessional, as a TA, that I'm just another sub on the roster, and that my formal job gets kind of secondary placement because, well, they do need to cover all the students, but, well, if that cuts into my formal job, then we're at an impasse in a way. And of course, I like my staff, I like my coworkers, I like my students, I like my school, so, I do what's necessary, but also, like, if it's cutting into my normal job, then why did I sign up for my normal job in the first place?
And is there any relief in sight on that, do you think?
Well, I know the district tries to give better incentives for substitutes, because I know some of the substitutes that work with us, some of them are, how do I say, they're reliable / consistent, so they're familiar faces, but sometimes, they're not working full-time. I mean, some of them are retirees, so they work consistently, but they don't work full-time, so those days are not there. It's like, we hope that we have enough substitutes. I know the district did some raises, but once some of the substitutes and I worked the math out, it wasn't as big as they were touting it to be. So, and also considering how substitutes have to deal with behavioral problems, it's definitely challenging for them to kind of consider, going back to substitute, since not only is it not the best paid job, but also it's a challenging job considering you have to get the respective students, build a rapport within one day. So I'm not sure. I know my district tried to do a substitute raise, and I'm pretty sure incentives and recruitment for substitutes, does exist. I know that Dallas ISD recently, or I think it might have been last summer, but definitely recently in terms of the school year, passed $15 minimum wage. In my district, that's not the minimum wage for, so I think starting there is something, whenever you can work in retail for more than a substitute, that sounds a bit more compelling, and there's already enough complaints about retail, so.
Have you thought about leaving the profession?
Yes, that January of 2022, that was a very intense moment. There was so much substituting to do that entire month. I didn't get to TA at all. Not until February, I think started February, I got to TA. And I know I told myself, if this keeps up, it's gonna hurt because it's my alma mater. I went to that high school, but I might have to resign. And then also this summer as well. This summer, I think it's the second year after COVID, so we're dealing with still a lot of fallout, social emotional fallout from students and also staff due to just how online learning went. So not just shorter attention spans, but also just, how do I say this, more unconventional behavior, just because, well, they were out of school for a time, and now coming back to a routine of school has become behaviorally difficult for some students. And some teachers, well, that's not what they not only not prepared for, but sign up for. You have students who are a bit more, how do I say this, unruly, and some of them really push the boundaries extremely far. And so because of that, some teachers have resigned, and so that's very, that for me, it's like with some of my coworkers I work with, resigned because of that. Do I feel comfortable, kind of going back to that and being the next resignation? So I've thought, twice about it. I don't like thinking about it because I like working in my school. I like working with students. I like being a teacher in teaching capacity, but it's definitely something that crossed my mind, yeah.
but at the end you decided to stay with it.
Yes, for the past few years, I built a relationship with my coworkers, my school, and my students, especially my students. And I care about their growth and development. I care about them becoming good people, and me being a part of that, and just all the little victories that come with them growing up. I know a student of mine, probably one of the best ones I still remember, was I was substituting in class, and so granted it was the last class of the day, so I did most of my job for most of the day. But he stopped by and said, "Hey, it's like, Mr. Kuba, it's like, you think I'm going to pass the STAR?" And it was, I think, a week before the Algebra 1 STAR test. And I'm like, "Well, it's like, did you study?" He's like, "Yeah." It's like, and so like, "Yeah, it'll be fine." It's like, "You're only one question away last time, so you should more than enough get more than one question right this time." He told me, "Just don't get cocky," because he definitely could get a little cocky at times. And I told him, it's like, "Yeah, just try your best. I taught you well, and you're really trying, so it'll be fine." He's like, "Are you sure about that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure." And lo and behold, he passed this year. So that was very nice. And I keep thinking, I'm like, wow, it's like, I was just wrapping up in the classroom and was covering in, and he decided to stop by after school. So that was very considerate of him. I think that, yeah, typically most students tend not to try to find their teaching assistant in the school, but he found me and he tried to get some reassurance, and he got reassurance. So that's something that some of the memories like those kind of keep me, remind me that, like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do.
So that was the reward for you.
Yes, yeah. Not only hearing that, hey, it's like, you think I'm going to pass, but also seeing that he passed. And I think this year, because I can't help all the teachers the same amount, but the teachers that I helped the most as a TA ended up getting some of the highest scores on campus on the math, on the Algebra STAR. So that was very neat. And of course, we don't want to always tie test performance to ability, and also, what's the other word? Not capacity, but capability. But it was very nice seeing, like, okay, I am making a difference here. And that's, I think, probably one of the most important words as a teacher, is that you're making a difference. And that's a very rewarding feeling.
And Yelena, you've been teaching for 25 years. And have you ever come to a point where you thought, you know what, I'm going to leave the profession?
Yes, especially when COVID happened. I was very nervous about going into the schools when COVID hit. We were virtual when it first happened, and then we switched to in person for some students and then virtual. I was very, very close to resigning, and I had to calm down and just think about, okay, we need to be here for these kids. Let me think about everything that I've done up to this point. We are taking measures to be safe, but I was thinking about my family. I was thinking about my own health. That was a point in my career where I was just like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to do the virtual teaching. Honestly, I didn't like it because you don't have the same interactions with your students. Kids need to be in person. Not to say that you can't do virtual, but we're not socialized that way, not to the point to where we had to just completely, do a lot of this online. There was a point to where we had to do virtual and in person because all the kids weren't back. And it's very challenging, it's very frustrating. When I started teaching, everything was in person. I'm pretty sure incoming teachers or pre-service teachers, that's going to be an option for them. They're socialized this way. The internet wasn't like it is now when it comes to education. So we've made great strides, because I know there are classes where there isn't a teacher, and because of that, they're doing it remotely, so therefore those kids are getting it virtually. But when I saw that big shift, that really scared me, because I was like, okay, we have COVID, so now what? Where does that put me? Because I co-teach, I pull kids into my own classroom, and I work in groups. A lot of my job is socialization. But when it comes to public education, we serve the masses in different, various types of settings and service models in order to help our kids. And I just thought I wasn't going to be effective with my job if I wasn't able to, fully do it in person.
And so what was the deciding factor that you would stay?
When they talked about vaccinations, the school district was taking steps to keep us safe with masks, the distancing. We had devices where we could sanitize and spray down, just getting the education, because I was learning as much as I could as far as how I could be safe for myself and my family, as well as also being safe for my students. Because at first it was like, we got to teach, but we have all these other things that could happen in the classroom. Somebody could get sick. So as time went on, and as the more I was able to interact, and I'm glad we didn't just go back in person fully. While we were online, there were things we were able to do, and as we became more knowledgeable just as a society, regarding what was going on with COVID, I felt a lot better.
And I wanted to ask you, because one of the unfinished pieces of business with the state legislature this year is school funding, but in large part teacher pay raises. When you listen to lawmakers, they all say they are committed to giving teachers a pay raise from the state, giving districts more money. And so I'm wondering, what is your message, and Yolanda, we'll start with you, what is your message to lawmakers who are going to be coming back in the fall to decide how much money should go, and there's $5 billion, I'm told, in the state budget set aside for funding for schools, in large part for teacher pay raises. So what's your message?
My message to lawmakers is that teachers work very, very hard. We deal with all the other things that come into the school. Whatever's going on in society actually filters into what we're doing. Besides teaching, we do the planning, we have the meetings, we keep track of data. We're there every day to make sure that these kids are doing what they need to do. Along with all of the other things that students are dealing with. We deal with students who are homeless, students who are hungry. As Mr. Kuba has alluded to, the social emotional piece, not only for the students, but also for the teachers. So first and foremost, we see it on the front lines. We see it, head on. And given that we went through all of the changes and sacrifices and the different learning styles with COVID, I was very disappointed when it came down that we would not be receiving raises. Even though the task force that was put together stated that one of the things that needed to be done was that we need a raise. So I was thrown off by it, and it kind of hurt, because they always say we're important, we're needed, and we are. But when this happened, it showed me that, well, are we really that important? Even though without it, without a teacher, we're the springboard for everything else. Someone had to teach someone something. They had to mentor someone. So this is like a core, this is the foundation of what we do.
George?
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, it's always had teachers are important, they're heroes, especially with essential workers, right, with nurses and doctors in the hospitals, way back beginning of the pandemic, where they're heroes, they're essential, and then when it comes to put the money where the mouth is, there's nothing. Teachers at least, I believe the last proposal was $4,000 across the board, because the previous one was $6,000 for rural and $2,000 for urban. And of course, teachers need their raises. I believe AFT did their study that kind of the lost decade, where the past decade, the overall teacher raise has been negative, actually, slightly negative. So there's actually been a decrease in net pay, just accounting for inflation. But for pairs, there wasn't anything. I know that AFT pushed para pay. I believe that the increase would have been to $15 an hour for the Respect campaign, and then there was a resolution that passed in the recent Texas AFT convention that minimum pay for paraprofessionals and other classified staff will be $25 an hour, which is pretty good. And especially in my case, that would be $10 more than I get paid right now. But it's looking not so great. Living in Texas, especially as a young person, it's not, there are moments, or many moments, especially during a legislative session, that I'm not proud of as a Texan. I don't feel proud. I'm wow, this is the state I live in. This is the future that I'll be growing up in, and my niece will be growing up in. But there, and considering that, as Yolanda said, that there was a task force, and the first one was actually what got a lot of flack because I believe they only had one teacher. So this is the new task force that they had more teachers in it, and they did recommend that there should pay raises, and of course that was disregarded. So I'm not sure. And the fact that that's uncertain, the fact that we keep hearing about promises and praise about teachers and school staff, and then like nothing is delivered, or even like a semblance of a delivery. It's very uncertain, very concerning that this is I would say what's the word, remuneration we get, the thanks we get, the appreciation, the respect that we get. Well, I mean, just because they say all this bunch of stuff, but if the action is empty, then what does that really mean? So it definitely is an insult to all the school staff and school workers and school teachers and everyone that works in the school that not only are we getting a delayed session, but we're probably going to get either a watered down raise and or some, I hope not, but some semblance of vouchers, which is somehow that's like a very strong priority for them, even though teacher retention is a necessary thing. So it's not looking great, and I hope that that my union, the state union, can try pushing harder, because it definitely is an uphill battle in Texas of all places to kind of push not just public sector well-being, but also public school well-being. But we'll see how it goes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just interviewed the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House recently, and they both said that they are committed, and the House and the Senate are committed to passing these raises. And so your thought is, I'll see it when I'll believe it when I see it.
Exactly.
And so let me ask you, because the task force report that you mentioned also brought up one of the things that you both mentioned, which was discipline problems in the classroom. How bad is it?
Well, I know that when we came back, so the first year of COVID was, as Linda said, it was a hybrid year. So fall of 2020 to spring of 2021. So that academic year, it was hybrid. And then by the end, at least how my school did it, is the last grading period, if there were students that were failing more than one class, they had to come back. So by that point, we were definitionally hybrid, like half in person, half online. And that was okay. I think for me, that'd be my first year working when classes were at half class size, and also a lot of learning was online. We just had to essentially monitor that students were not misbehaving in the class. That was doable. And for someone being a first-year substitute, first-year public education, I was worried. I'm like, am I going to be respected? And okay, it worked out. But this next year, it was fully back in person. It was pretty intense. I know that in our faculty meeting, either the principal or assistant principal said, our homeroom almost looks like a passing period. There were so many students out of class and wandering hallways, and it's very difficult to, homeroom is not exactly a core subject, but whenever that becomes a norm, that becomes more difficult to discipline and to teach. And then this year, we had a better job in terms of wandering hallways, but the new cohort of students, the new freshman students, the ninth graders, we had some surprising issues for them being freshmen. We had a lot of suspensions for THC-related paraphernalia, so vapes, as we say, marijuana possession, which, they're 14. Like, sure, I'm not naive or innocent to think that, oh, how can these kids do drugs? But also like, wow, that's really young to have possession of that. And then also some of the upperclassmen, and unfortunately one of them I remember fondly, but they also had, they coordinated their passing periods so when they could use the restroom so that they could host a fight club, which is very weird. I mean, I was a good student in high school. I was a nerd, and in some ways still am, but I never thought like, oh, I'm going to take time out of class to go with my friends to host a boxing match.
In school?
In school, yeah.
Where? In the bathroom?
In the bathrooms, yeah.
A fight club in the bathroom?
Yes, yeah. So those kinds of issues, and then just kind of smaller issues of disrespect, right? Just disregarding teachers' directions, talking back to teachers, just small issues like that. And those kinds of issues, like talking back to teachers. That led one of my coworkers to quit because it just became too much. And to be fair, a lot of this also could, or could be kind of traced along lines of gender as well. Sometimes women teachers get a lot more flack than if it was a male teacher. And so, of course, students' behavior is learned. So somewhere students pick up that the women teachers tend to, like, I don't know why they think that they can be a bit more disrespectful to the women teachers, but because the coworker that quit was a woman teacher. She decided to quit because the disrespect got too much, became too much rather. So yeah, it's a lot of discipline, which you don't think you want to deal in high school. And I think one of my coworkers said it best that like, yeah, it's like no, the middle schoolers are actually being middle schoolers in high school. So like we're not in high school anymore. We're working in the middle school. And so I think development kind of got pushed, a year or even a few grade levels over. And you can kind of trace it down the board, like how students are behaving in middle school, how they behave in elementary school. Like the behavior is kind of, so even though students like grade wise, they are, let's say grade level, like their behavior is a few grades behind. And so that's definitely something I'm not sure I don't have a good answer to that, I'm sorry.
And you're in high school, and Yelena, what are you seeing at the elementary school level? Same thing?
Yes, the same thing. Since I have the 5th grade group, which is, yes, elementary, and we are seeing the disrespect. I believe also during COVID, because the kids didn't get that socialization piece, as George was mentioning, they missed those interactions, so they're actually behind. So some of the behaviors are immature. When it comes to just interacting with peers, it was like the kids had to relearn how to, interact with each other. And when you're behind a computer screen for part of the school year, it pushed them behind. And then once they came back into school, it's like starting all over. It was more than day one. It was like, how do you do school again? And given that I'm also with Southwest Dallas AFT, and we represent the Southwest suburbs, and the teachers mentioned the same thing as far as just the disrespect and a lot of the interactions that the kids had, just basic courtesy type behaviors they actually struggled with. Some of the kids just struggled socially and emotionally. They were just feeling anxious about a lot of things. I know that, some of the districts were implementing the social emotional learning component for students as well as staff, just to talk about, okay, what's going on, how can we alleviate some of those things. We also put some strategies in place as far as, the kids had opportunity to talk about, what's going on, what's good, as far as, what's going on with school, with you, how are you doing emotionally. So there was a lot of things that the kids were doing. They just didn't know how to communicate all the time, and that definitely impacted behavior in the classroom, on the playground, in the cafeteria. So we were just gradually just trying to relearn how do we just be social, with each other.
And does all that have an impact on the learning that's taking place in the classroom?
Oh, yes. Yes. If you're dealing with a discipline problem, you have to deal with that before you can actually get to the learning. Because if you're not in the mindset to learn, it's not going to happen.
George, you're shaking your head.
Oh yeah, and it can spread too. Like if you don't address it in the moment, like nip it in the bud, it spreads to the students because then, and unfortunately this is kind of an individual, it can be an individual like perspective, but if other students see that you don't push back on a student's like, and we can say, all the way disrespect to just either just non-compliance, they see it's okay to push back a little bit more. And sure, like talking back, especially coming from a Hispanic household where like it's very much frowned upon, even though sometimes, you may be right. Yeah, we're not talking, typically, students aren't talking back because, the teacher is in the wrong, which we make mistakes, yeah. A lot of it is just kind of out of spite sometimes, or just out of a habit. And while earlier I said that I don't have a good answer to that, I think Yelena kind of reminded me that, a lot of the time it's like, like I said, behavior is learned. And so, not only how parents behave at home, but also how parents went through during the pandemic. I know both as a family member and as a worker how it felt going through a pandemic, losing a family member as well, and how that impacts. And so I'm thinking that how the parents feel about their living situation, economic situation, social situation, that definitely filters on students. And of course, because of online learning, and this is also another behavioral thing, students' escape tends to be their phones. They tend to just kind of aimlessly wander on their phones, and that affects their social emotional learning. And of course, if they don't know how to behave according to norms, then they kind of behave in ways that require some discipline. But how to do the discipline, well, that's we would have to kind of go back in time and then kind of think of something. But yeah, because I don't think any of us had any post-pandemic training, so it's very difficult to think how can we kind of reset the behavioral clock on them. Yeah, I'm kind of back to square one on that one. Not sure what to do.
Are the districts doing enough to help you with the disciplinary issues?
Personally, in my school district and at my school, I don't want to, how do I say this, be too critical, but I have to be honest, I'm going to say no. That's again why one of my coworkers, the woman teacher that faced a lot of just little acts of disrespect, that's why she had to quit. There wasn't enough support from administration, from the district as well, like the directives, because at least how it seems our campus works is that the district, of course, has some guidelines. They don't tend to overbear in terms of managing every school, and then every school kind of does their own thing a little autonomous, which in a way is a good thing. But the administration in our school was a little bit, and I can understand too, you don't want to come off, what's the word, cross from disciplinary into being vindictive or having retribution.
Retribution, yeah.
Yeah,
Or penalizing.
Yeah, there we go. I'm trying to think of the action of retribution, right? Yeah, you don't want to do that. So I think in some ways we resolved it. Like, for example, the bathroom thing, it's like, well, we identified the specific students. They essentially gave them only a specific pass, like they can use the restroom. So if they were caught out of classroom at the pass, they were given some consequence for that. And unfortunately in schools, the easiest consequence to get is either lunch detention or ISS, in-school suspension. And well, students already kind of know how that works, especially if the students that are end up repeating the same behaviors. They know, oh yeah, they'll put me in lunch detention, I'm inconvenienced a little bit, but then just then they don't there's no weight to it and there's no gravity to it, and so they don't realize that, hey, maybe I should change my behavior. And to be fair, it's I think about it, we don't really have a process where, and of course this is not the best example, but how whenever someone completes their sentence from jail or prison, it's they are, and this is very lacking as well, but there are ways to reintegrate them back to society, especially if it's a nonviolent offense. So recidivism doesn't happen. But with those students, they go back to the classroom, after the consequence, but there is no process of hey, it's how can we help you not redo that? How do we help you not make the same mistake? Because now I realize it's a lot of students that do make the worst mistakes, just end up repeating them anyways. So it's very difficult to, it's definitely something that we can address, because it's not a random student that does it. It's a student that we can find cause for, and that's something that we can address because it's a student, or it's a specific number of students that we can address. So even though in some instances the response has been okay, again, restricting number of students to go to the restroom, giving those students that are repeat offenders a specific time to use the restroom, having some supervision. But other behaviors, it's very difficult to address, because it's well, you can't also throw everyone into ISS. Our room is very small too. I think we only fit 14 people. So it's it's very challenging, because you don't just want to be kind of like a monopoly, straight to jail. You can't do that. No, we have to be more constructive about it, and because that's also our job. We have to be constructive about it.
Lynn, did you have anything to add?
The consensus has been with most of the teachers that I've worked with through the teachers union, they felt as though they weren't really being supported when it came to discipline. Oftentimes they felt as though students were being sent back to class for behavior they thought they should have maybe had more consequences for. We do have plans in place when it comes to discipline, depending on what a student is doing. I mean, yes, kids are going to do things that they do just being kids, but that structure, that piece where, you know, you're coming to school every day, this is the expectation, it's been a struggle because of all the changes that we went through. That's why I was saying this year I'm anticipating it, you know, things being better for the kids now that, you know, COVID has subsided considerably. So now they've had that structure for a while as far as this is how we do things. And I believe a lot of the challenges with behavior was due to the fact that they didn't have that structure. They weren't provided that structure virtually because, of course, you know, they're at home, but now that we're coming back, we've come back in, and it's been a while. Hopefully we can get that put back into place, and it'll come more naturally for the kids because children actually thrive in a structured environment.
The last topic that I wanted to ask you about was preparation for class. This task force report said that teachers feel as if there's just not enough time to make a great lesson plan, grade all the papers, email parents back, and do everything that's required of them. You've been doing this for 25 years. What do you say about that?
They're absolutely right. There isn't enough time. Over the years, the demands as far as what we do has actually increased. With the planning time, you have time to, which is, I believe, 450 minutes every 2 weeks. So you get a block of time to do your planning. You also have to make phone calls. We also have to do a lot of tracking with data. Also during that time, we have meetings. So it compounds. So if you have a meeting and you need to grade papers, that pushes you that further behind. If you have a phone call, you have to make, and of course you want to, you know, keep that communication open with parents. If you're doing the phone call, you may not be able to always, you know, stay or get to that meeting or get to that grading, because when it comes to, in order to do the job effectively, you have to monitor the progress of your students. And sometimes there's like a training, a meeting. We have a lot of meetings in education, more so now than when I started. And some of them are necessary. Sometimes I feel as though, you know, maybe we could have just had an email regarding something as opposed to having a meeting. And the big thing is to make sure, you know, your students show progress. We do that by looking at assignments. We look at a lot of testing that the students have. So there's all these different components that we have to do as educators, and I agree wholeheartedly. It's just not enough time. So oftentimes people are working after school, they're taking work home. There are teachers who come in before school just to keep up with the demands of, you know, what's expected.
And you're one of them.
I'm one of them. Yes, I am. I do take work home oftentimes, or I'll stay late, and just to you know, get caught up, because I want to come in knowing what I need to do for my students the following day to show growth, to show progress, and it can be taxing. It can be really taxing at times.
George?
So as a soon-to-be / not yet teacher, but also being, you know, in the presence of teachers, I see their workload. Yeah, I know some of them, because I'm bilingual, they would ask me to help them translate phone calls to parents. And while like the time on the call might be like 10 seconds, the whole like preparation too, and like just waiting for them to answer or not answer, leaving a voicemail, adds up. You know, ends up being like 30 seconds to a minute. And then if you have to do like 10, 15 phone calls, well, that's 10, 15 minutes that you end up not having to do planning, you're not having to do any other like less or grading things to do. And so sometimes I would help my fellow teachers out. I would, you know, help them with phone calls while they were like busy grading something, because I knew like, yeah, they don't have enough time to plan everything out. and luckily for teachers, they do have, it's a legal right that they have every 2 weeks, 450 minutes of planning, unless I think you can waive that for extra pay, like if you have to cover or something, which that can happen too. You can get asked to cover for your planning period. For teachers, like they can compensate for that. Paras don't have any of that. We don't have a dedicated planning period, even if we're instructional paras, so helping with teaching and instruction. We don't have any kind of planning period. We don't have any kind of, give up for your off period so you can go cover this class. So all that compensation kind of and remuneration goes out the window if you're a para. But yeah, there's not enough time, and surprisingly, 450 minutes, is even sounds like a lot of time. Like, it's either 45 minutes every day for 10 days, or it's like an hour and a half every other day. That's not enough time to reach out to parents to plan not just a lesson, but a good lesson, a comprehensive lesson, and also grade, and then also keep up on your students, both like, grade-wise, like, with data, but also keeping up, emotionally, right? Again, we are not just machines. We want to make sure that our students are growing and developing well enough or really good, and we care about them. I mean, that's why we're public teachers. We care about who we serve, and we serve students, and so we want to make sure that they're doing the best they can with what they have.
My last question to both of you, and I appreciate your time, is, and Yelena, we can start with you. Are you hopeful for that things are going to get better?
I'm hopeful, yes, in that there are still a lot of teachers, a lot of educators that really want students to thrive. They really want to work at it. I'm still advocating for us to get the respect that we want, that we need. And at this point, right now, it's not looking too good given what's just happened with the legislation. But we're going to still keep fighting. I'm still very hopeful for that. I still get excited when it's time for school. I'm excited about, what I'm going to do. What I love about teaching is the opportunity to see a person grow. And I also have the opportunity to be really creative and helping them, get to the next level. Because I do, see students. Oh, hello, Mrs. Trice. How are you? Thank you so much for what you did for me. I'm in college. That's a plus. That's a plus. And that'll always be with them forever. So yeah, I'm still very hopeful.
George.
Despite what I said today, I am hopeful as well. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of the only way you should be, because you really don't want to see public schools tumble further than they already are. And I know I had a student teacher last year who told me, it's like, hey, I think I'm hopeful things are going. He told me, it's like, I don't know, man. So he was telling, it's like, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. And I'm like, ah. And in some ways, considering how this year went, and also not just with school, students and school behavior, just kind of how schools function within the school, but also legislatively speaking, unfortunately, I think in some ways he might have had some credence. But I am hopeful that things will get better. I mean, it's only, things only get better when we do our best to try to make them better. It definitely is very helpful to have a hopeful and faithful outlook, but if we're not doing, our part to trying to not just change, but also amend the situation and account for what is working against us, then it's very difficult. We kind of, and not to say that teachers aren't already working hard enough, and all paras and all the staff aren't working hard enough, but definitely this is an uphill battle to try to assert that, yes, we indeed need to be respected. And so if that's the case, then that means that we have to sacrifice even more. And, hearing the word sacrifice, some teachers probably already might make them a little nervous, because that's what they've been doing their whole life. As a teacher, you sacrifice. And my hope is that in the future, hopefully before I retire, that sacrifice is no longer in a teacher's lexicon. And not in the sense of they shouldn't, do more for the students, but they already are. What more do you want them to give up? At this point, they've given up other careers, they've given up other jobs, they've given up livelihoods to be a teacher, to progress not just their students and their community, but in the bigger sense, society as a whole. And if this is kind of respect and the remuneration and the reward they get for doing that, then like what other hope is left then? So I do hope and that we have a better outcome, because personally I don't want to leave, but if I'm made to leave, then that's a sad thing. Young people that want to enter the profession because they really care, they see the potential and they really care about the students and the prospect of a public school, and seeing like all the attacks on it and all the disrespect and all the obstacles placed in front of it. We don't want to push away people from not being teachers. We want people to see that teaching is a viable, not just a dignified profession, but a viable profession. And when that's not being seen, then like, how else are we going to progress society? How else are students going to want to be other things in life if teachers are pushed to the bottom of the totem pole, right? So my hope is that, I really do hope that this is the worst yet, and that we are on our way up, but also, don't want to be naive about it. And the only way that we can avert the worst is that if we start pushing back more. And I think teachers, we need to realize that a lot of these problems aren't because of us or because of our specific districts or schools. It's a broader issue, and that because if it's a broader issue, then we do need to band together to push back against that broader issue, because that broader issue affects everyone and everything, and well, we are everyone, and so we need to push back against that together. It's not simply an individual or local issue at this point.
George Kuba and Yelena Trice, thank you so much. We really appreciate what you've said today. Thank you.
Thank you.